Nobody ruined your life. Let that sentence sit. Let it burn. Because the most dangerous lie you were ever taught wasn't about money, talent, or success. It was the lie that someone else is responsible for where you are right now. You learned it quietly. You learned it through excuses that sounded reasonable. I had bad parents. I was born poor. The system is rigged. If I had support, I'd be successful. And every time you repeated that lie, something invisible happened. You handed over your power. The moment you blame your parents, you make them stronger than you. The moment you blame society, you shrink yourself below it. The moment you blame timing, luck, or fate, you accept being a passenger in your own life. And passengers don't decide where the car goes. They just complain about the road. Look at your life right now. Be honest. Not motivational poster honest, brutal mirror honest. Are you where you promised yourself you'd be 5 years ago? Are you living the life you imagined when you said one day, or are you still explaining why it hasn't happened yet? Because explanations feel intelligent, but they are just sophisticated excuses. And excuses are the most expensive habit a human can have. They cost you years, confidence, and identity. You don't fail because life is unfair. Life has always been unfair. You fail because blaming feels easier than becoming disciplined. Here's the truth nobody wants to hear. Your pain might not be your fault, but your future is your responsibility. Your parents may have failed you. Society may have ignored you. Money may have been tight. Opportunities may have been limited. But none of that changes one brutal reality. No one is coming to fix it for you. No one is waking up tomorrow thinking, let me rescue this person from the consequences of their choices. And the longer you wait for rescue, the deeper the hole gets. Victimhood doesn't just delay success. It rewires your identity. It teaches you to react instead of act, complain instead of create, and wait instead of build. You see, personal responsibility is terrifying. Not because it's hard, but because it removes every excuse you've been hiding behind. When you take responsibility, you can no longer blame your parents for your habits, your boss for your laziness, your past for your fear, or society for your lack of action. Responsibility puts the spotlight exactly where most people don't want it, on you. And that's why most people reject it. Because if it's your fault, then it's your job to fix it. And fixing yourself requires discipline, sacrifice, discomfort, and consistency. Excuses protect you from. Let me say something that might offend you, but it might also save you. Your parents didn't ruin your life. They may have shaped your starting point, but you chose to stay there. Society didn't steal your dreams. You just stopped chasing them when it got uncomfortable. Money didn't block your success. You used lack of money as permission to stop trying. Timing didn't betray you. You waited until motivation showed up instead of acting without it. Luck didn't abandon you. You just refused to prepare for opportunity. And the truth is harsh, but it's also freeing. Everything changes the moment you stop blaming and start owning. Ownership is power. Ownership is dangerous. Ownership forces growth. The second you say, this is on me, your brain stops searching for excuses and starts searching for solutions. But most people don't want solutions. They want sympathy. They want understanding. They want validation for staying the same. They want someone to say, it's okay, it's not your fault. And while that sounds kind, it's actually cruel because it keeps you weak. Real care doesn't comfort your excuses. Real care confronts your potential. Think about this. Two people can grow up in the same broken home, same poverty, same trauma. One becomes disciplined, driven, and dangerous in the best way. The other stay bitter, angry, and stuck. What's the difference? Responsibility. One says, this ends with me. The other says, this happened to me. One uses pain as fuel. The other uses pain as an identity. And identities are hard to escape. When you see yourself as a victim, you subconsciously seek proof that the world is against you. Every failure confirms it. Every setback justifies quitting. And slowly, without realizing it, you build a life that matches your excuses, not your potential. Here's the scariest part. Blame feels good in the short term. It protects your ego. It saves you from feeling inadequate. It lets you say, I could have been great if things were different, but years pass. Opportunities disappear. Confidence erodes. And one day you wake up tired, not physically, but spiritually. Tired of explaining, tired of hoping, tired of starting over. And that's when regret shows up. Not loud, not dramatic, quiet, heavy, permanent. Regret doesn't scream, it whispers, you knew better. Personal responsibility is not about guilt, it's about control. The moment you own your life, you regain control over your actions, habits, time, and future. You stop waiting for permission. You stop negotiating with comfort. You stop needing approval. You stop explaining why you didn't try. And that's when transformation actually begins. Not when life becomes fair, but when you become relentless. This is the line in the sand. Either you keep blaming and stay safe, or you take responsibility and become dangerous. Because the world doesn't change for people who complain. It changes for people who decide, and the decision starts here. Blame doesn't just delay success. It corrupts your character. It rewires the way you think, the way you act, and eventually the way you see yourself. At first, it feels harmless, logical even. I didn't choose this family. I didn't choose this economy. I didn't choose this country. And you're right, you didn't choose the starting point. But here's where everything goes wrong. You start using what you didn't choose as permission for what you won't do. And slowly, responsibility slips out of your hands, not dramatically, but quietly, decision by decision, excuse by excuse. Blame kills discipline first. Discipline requires one thing most people don't want to give: consistency without guarantees. When you blame external forces, your brain learns a dangerous lesson. Effort doesn't matter. Why work hard if the system is rigged? Why stay consistent if luck decides everything? Why sacrifice if success isn't fair? And the moment effort feels pointless, discipline dies. You stop waking up early. You stop pushing when it hurts. You stop doing the boring work that builds greatness. Not because you're lazy, but because blame taught you that trying is optional. Then confidence disappears. Real confidence doesn't come from motivation or hype. It comes from keeping promises to yourself. Every time you say you'll do something and don't, your self-trust erodes, and blame gives you the perfect excuse to break those promises without guilt. It's not my fault. Anyone in my position would struggle. I'll start when things improve. But confidence doesn't wait for better conditions. It's built in bad ones. When you avoid responsibility, you avoid growth. And when you avoid growth long enough, you start doubting yourself. Not because you can't succeed, but because you've trained yourself not to follow through. Here's the part nobody talks about. Blame turns you into a spectator of your own life. You watch others win and tell yourself stories about why they had it easier. You scroll, compare, judge, criticize, anything except act. And deep down it hurts, because a part of you knows the truth. You know you could do more. You know you've settled. You know you've been negotiating with comfort instead of committing to change. And that inner conflict, the gap between who you are and who you know you could be, that's where anxiety lives. That's where frustration grows. That's where self-respect quietly dies. Blame also destroys identity. Over time, excuses stop being something you use and start becoming who you are. You don't just say, I'm struggling because of my background. You become the person who had it rough. You don't just say opportunities are limited. You become the person who never gets a chance. And once something becomes your identity, changing it feels like betrayal. You'd rather stay stuck than step into the unknown version of yourself that requires effort, risk, and accountability. So you defend your limitations. You argue for your weaknesses. You wear your struggle like a badge instead of a challenge. And the most dangerous part, people start agreeing with you. They validate your excuses. They comfort your stagnation. They say, yeah, it's hard out here. And every nod of agreement tightens the chains, because nothing kills ambition faster than shared helplessness. When everyone around you blames the same things, no one grows. You form communities around complaining instead of building, around criticizing instead of creating, around explaining instead of executing. And suddenly taking responsibility makes you the odd one out, the uncomfortable one, the one who thinks they're better. But here's the brutal truth. Responsibility is lonely at first. When you stop blaming, you lose the right to complain. You lose the comfort of excuses. You lose the sympathy that comes with victimhood. But what you gain is far more powerful. You gain momentum. Because when you accept that your actions matter, even in an unfair world, every small win rebuilds your confidence. Every disciplined choice strengthens your identity. Every uncomfortable step proves to your mind that you are not powerless. Blame tells you you can't. Responsibility asks, what can you control? Blame keeps you emotional. Responsibility makes you effective. Blame focuses on fairness. Responsibility focuses on results. And results don't care about your story. They only care about your actions. You don't escape blame by being motivated. You escape it by making a decision, a non-negotiable one, a decision to stop explaining and start executing, a decision to stop waiting and start working, a decision to become someone who acts even when it's uncomfortable, unfair, and unnoticed. That's how identity changes. Not through words, but through repeated proof. This is where most people quit mentally. Not because they can't do it, but because responsibility removes their emotional safety net. And standing alone with your choices is terrifying until you realize something powerful. You were never weak. You were just distracted by excuses. And once those excuses die, something dangerous wakes up. The moment you take full responsibility, something strange happens. Your pain stops being a weakness and starts becoming a weapon. Pain no longer asks for sympathy, it demands transformation. When you stop blaming, every struggle becomes information. Every failure becomes feedback. Every setback becomes a lesson instead of a life sentence. And this is where most people get it wrong. They think responsibility is heavy, that it adds pressure, that it makes life harder. The truth is the opposite. Responsibility removes confusion. It cuts through noise. It tells you exactly where to focus on what you can control and nothing else. When you own your life, discipline stops feeling like punishment and starts feeling like self-respect. You wake up early not because someone told you to, but because you're tired of disappointing yourself. You train your body not to look good for others, but because strength reminds you that you're in control. You work when you don't feel like it because feelings no longer run your schedule. Responsibility creates structure, and structure creates freedom. People think freedom is doing whatever you want, but real freedom is doing what you must, even when you don't want to. Here's the shift. Victims ask, why is this happening to me? Responsible people ask, what is this teaching me? That single question changes everything. Suddenly, failure isn't personal, it's practical. You stop spiraling emotionally and start adjusting strategically. You stop crying about what went wrong and start fixing what's weak. And that mindset compounds. One disciplined day builds confidence. One hard decision builds momentum. One uncomfortable habit builds identity. Before you know it, you're no longer the person who reacts to life. You're the person who responds with intention. Responsibility also sharpens your standards. You stop tolerating chaos. You stop allowing disrespect from others and from yourself. You stop saying yes to things that drain you and no to things that challenge you. You realize that every later is a lie you tell your future self. Every excuse is a debt you'll eventually have to pay with interest. So you raise the bar, not loudly, not for attention, quietly, consistently, and that's where real power is built, in silence when no one is watching. Most people want motivation. What they really need is non-negotiable standards. Motivation fades. Standards don't. Responsible people don't ask, do I feel like it today? They ask, is this who I decided to be? And when identity leads, behavior follows. You don't rise to the level of your goals. You fall to the level of your standards, and responsibility is the foundation those standards are built on. This is also where loneliness hits. When you take responsibility, you outgrow people who live on excuses. Conversations change, complaints bore you, drama feels heavy. You start craving progress over validation. And yes, it's uncomfortable, but so is staying stuck. At least growth has a direction. At least discipline leads somewhere. And eventually the loneliness turns into alignment. You find people who move like you move, think like you think, build like you build, but it only happens after you choose responsibility over belonging. Here's the hard truth. The world doesn't reward potential. It rewards proof. And responsibility is how proof is created. Proof that you can be trusted. Proof that you can be consistent. Proof that you can lead yourself before leading others. Once you build that proof, confidence becomes unshakable. Not loud, not arrogant, quiet, grounded, dangerous. Because now, no matter what happens, you know something unbreakable. You can adapt. If you lose money, you can rebuild. If you fail, you can adjust. If you fall behind, you can catch up. Not because life is fair, but because you are disciplined, because you are responsible, because you don't outsource your power to circumstances. This is what separates people who rise from people who repeat the same year over and over again. Not luck, not talent, not background, not ownership. And once ownership becomes your identity, excuses have nowhere to live,